Hello there, good morning, welcome back. We have now got our economic news in our special coverage in these turbulent times. Live from Cairo, this is Qnews on your Friday morning. Now, the head of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, has warned that Europe may have only about 6 weeks of jet fuel remaining if the current supply disruptions persist. We also go to Asia, where Japan has announced a $10 billion framework to help Asian countries secure energy supplies amid the rising competition for oil due to the Middle East tensions. One of the big worries of this war may be about to come to pass, as the head of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, has warned that Europe may have only about 6 weeks of jet fuel remaining if the current supply disruptions persist. Birol cautioned that flight cancellations could soon occur if oil supplies remain blocked due to the ongoing Middle East conflict. He described the situation as potentially the largest energy crisis ever faced, driven by disruptions in the flow of oil, gas, and other vital resources through the Strait of Hormuz. Birol warned the crisis could have severe global economic repercussions, with prolonged disruption likely to slow growth and fuel inflation worldwide. The International Monetary Fund has stated that European governments should avoid broadly shielding consumers and businesses from the rising energy prices, as it distorts market signals and strains public finances. According to the IMF's Europe Department Chief, Alfred Kammer, higher prices help reduce demand and rebalance markets, especially as disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz drive costs up. The IMF urged targeted support for vulnerable households instead of broad subsidies, noting that past untargeted measures were costly and inefficient. It also stressed that any aid should be temporary as Europe faces growing long-term fiscal pressures. Also, the International Monetary Fund has said the European Central Bank may need to raise interest rates modestly this year to counter the energy-driven inflation before potentially easing again in 2027. The IMF's Europe Department Chief, Alfred Kammer, said that under the IMF's scenario, rates could rise by around 50 basis points in 2026 to keep policy broadly neutral, with cuts possible the following year, depending on conditions. He added that while the shock is supply-driven, linked in part to disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz, the central bank's response remains uncertain and highly data-dependent, with risks of second-round inflation effects still a concern. Now let's go to Beirut and join the professor of international economics at the Lebanese University, Jassem Ajaka. Before we get to the economic news, can you just give us a little update of how things are in Beirut this morning? We were hearing that even despite the ceasefire, Israel has been embarking on some strikes. Is that true where you are?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Really, in fact, the situation is a little bit calm. We didn't really, in fact, notice any disruption at this level. Really, I'm not involved a lot in the politics to follow the information related to the military situation. But I do believe that globally the ceasefire is respected, and we hope that it will stay like this because the situation in Lebanon cannot really stand up more than that, and especially if the strikes continue, we will have a very, very bad situation. But globally, I do believe that the ceasefire is respected. Maybe some localized, let's say, violations, but this is in fact is inside the agreement of the ceasefire that Israel has the right to intervene each time that it judged that it's really necessary for that.
Well, we shall see what happens. Wish you the best, of course, if Israel does
Thank you.
adhere to the ceasefire deal. It might be a first. I think 15,000 violations of the previous one signed with Lebanon in 2024. So we'll see what happens with that. But let's get to the big problems in the economy then. Of course, this problem with jet fuel has been coming down the track, and people have been worrying about this. Does this sound about right, these estimates of how much Europe and other places may have?
Well, we are standing really at the precipice of a global logistic collapse. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz has been described as a shock hold on a map. But today, that shock hold is really tightening around the throat of the European economy. And as you mentioned it in the introduction, Birol issued a final warning that that Europe is at 6 weeks away from an empty tank. So really, if the gates of the Arab Gulf do not swing open, really, I do believe that we will see maybe thousands of flights that they are switched, they are cancelled very simply, and we do believe that it's not just about the travel and the flights. It's about the whole economy because many of the goods and services that we have, I mean, through the globalization, they are in fact traveled or transferred through what we call the aviation. So that's why it's globally, let's say, an inflation that will eat everything, our savings, the geopolitical standoff. That we have really hit the reserves that will impact our savings immediately. And this is, in fact, will hit not just the countries where you have the conflicts, but also the whole Western civilization. I do believe that the countdown has begun. But let me explain something, please, if I have the time.
Of course, of course.
Today we have a summit at Paris where we have 40 countries that they participate to something that we call an initiative really to open the Strait of Hormuz. And they will send military fleets to really to travel with the ships that they are transporting goods and oil, of course. So the main idea behind this, what I want to highlight, and it's a geopolitical really matter, that really I think that Donald Trump succeeded really in involving the European nations in this conflict. Now they disagreed together about the aim or the goal of this summit because Donald Trump wanted something like a military plus diplomatic, let's say, answer to Iran. But the Europeans, they wanted a little bit between brackets, a peaceful mission. I don't think that it's a peaceful mission. I think that Donald Trump has succeeded in involving these guys in the
I think Starmer and Macron weren't really wanting to get involved, and I think partly because they didn't really know what they what Trump wanted them to do about the Strait of Hormuz. If you give me your assessment of where things stand at the moment, of course, we had Iran saying that the Strait of Hormuz was open, but not for anybody supporting America or Israel to get through, but allowing Chinese ships or Russian vessels to get through, anybody who's friendly to Iran. And then we have Donald Trump coming along and doubly blocking and blockading the Strait of Hormuz. So now we've got the Iranians and the Americans blocking the Strait. What on earth is going on?
I think it's a little bit like Iran is trying from its side really to push or to increase the pressure on the U.S. President Donald Trump, really through the international opinion, by saying that this is in fact is unfair. You are harming us by forbidding the supply of oil and so on. And this is in fact, in case of stopping the war, this is something positive for Iran. Now, from the other side, Donald Trump he made a, let's say, strategic movement by retreating from this war a little bit under the umbrella, what is called the ceasefire, and he entered immediately to the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is, in fact, under the authority, or let's say, under the power of the United States. So it's not so difficult for the American fleet to really accompany the crude oil ships. But the idea is really, in fact, that Donald Trump, and more specifically because he has the mid-term elections, he needs already an international backup. And this backup, it's not military, it's just political. That's why, really, I think that he won in this strategic battle, let's say, between both. So I do believe that he is able, really, in fact, to open this Strait of Hormuz, but he wants the involvement of the European and more specifically the NATO, and we know a little bit the conflicts between the NATO leaders and Donald Trump about this subject. So that's why I do believe that this may continue for maybe days or even a week, but it will finish by opening the Strait of Hormuz. Because, as I told you, military is under the control of the United States. Of course, Iranians may put maritime mines inside the Strait of Hormuz. This will complicate the mission, but at the end, we saw that the American, the U.S. fleet really, in fact, entered the Strait of Hormuz, and we saw some ships that they, in fact, they passed through this strait. So it's not really.
I think there was some talk this morning that the United States might carry out some limited strikes on the Strait of Hormuz, which would be them breaking their own ceasefire if that was to happen. But one of the things that I know Britain has come out and said, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves and other members of the government have come out to say that there cannot be a toll system on the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump seemed like he was quite sympathetic to Iran taking control of the Strait of Hormuz and charging a toll for anyone to come by. And I think he was after a piece of that pie himself as well. Do you think we are going to get to a situation where Iran is allowed to into a situation it wasn't in before the war, running the Strait of Hormuz and using it to take tolls? Do you think that's going to happen?
Impossible. Just let's take some countries. Just some countries to tell you that it's impossible. I mean, there is a big mine there. Mine, it means mine where we extract the wealth. There is a big mine there, in fact, of money that Donald Trump will not leave to the Iranians, in fact, to do it. And that's why he wants to share if there is something, in fact, at this level. Second, the UK, and we heard this from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Cooker, I think, is the name. She said very simply that it's unacceptable for UK that we put taxes on the ships that they are passing through the straits, because this is a violation of the international law. And if we do such thing, it will become, in fact, for all the straits around the world, all the routes, maritime routes, it will be something like that. And this is, in fact, a situation that nobody can handle. The third, if you take the Gulf countries, they will not accept that. I mean, it's impossible to be under the mercy of the Iranians passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The simplest thing that they will do, that they will, in fact, open another strait, maybe, or channel, maritime channel in the UAE, or maybe they will also install new pipes, in fact, to transfer the goods related to that through the land. So I think it's difficult to really trust at this level, and more specifically because you have a divergence at the political level between Iran, the regime that is ruling Iran, and the Western. There is, in fact, a big divergence at the political level. We are so far from the human rights. We are so far from the, let's say, the freedom of the economy. So it's true that we see sometimes some signals coming from Western countries like France or even UK. They are interested more, in fact, in investments inside Iran, because Iran may generate big revenues if really it fits the international policy. But I do believe that it's impossible to let Iran manage the Straits of Hormuz. It's for me, I think the probability is so low.
Yeah, and of course, the fuel shortages, if they do come to pass and things start to get very difficult. I was talking to a friend in New Zealand yesterday, and they've already started to have problems. Australia has as well, parts of Europe too. And of course, if there is talk of fuel shortages, people will start to try and bulk buy. There'll be a run on the fuel, and we're going to end up in a pretty desperate situation, are we not?
I do believe that. I do believe that. And more specifically, the idea is not related, in fact, just to the jet fuel inside Europe, because every, in fact, let's say, company, air company that's serving any destination in Europe will have this problem. I mean, because from where you will put kerosene inside your plane. So I think that the situation is more global. And as I told you, there is a sector where we will have a big problem. It's the drugs sector. Some medicines, they really necessitate, excuse me, the quick transfer in the aviation. So using the aviation. So I do believe that we will have difficulties at many levels. And of course, everything will be translated as additional costs to the end consumer. And second, will have really shortage in many drugs that they are really crucial for many around the world.
It does seem as well that we're really not very well prepared when things go wrong. You were talking about problems in aviation, transport, industry, households, medicines, as you were saying. It doesn't take long for everything to fall apart, even just with one strait being closed and running out of jet fuel very quickly. I think many people would be surprised to know how few backups and stockpiles countries have and how quickly everything starts to disintegrate.
Exactly. Exactly. As I told you previously at the beginning of this interview, we have been described, in fact, the Strait of Hormuz as a shock hold on a map. But today, in fact, it's a shock hold that start to hit the majority of the economies around the world. I mean, the Gulf is not just about the fuel. It's also about the fertilizer. It's also about the helium. It's about also the chemical products. It's about many things. So I do believe that really maybe and this is it's just in fact a speculation, not more than that. Maybe the only one who knew about the consequences really it was the United States of America, and as I told you, they wanted really, in fact, to put pressure on the European countries, and I think I do believe that many around the world will be surprised a little bit, and they will start looking at the what we call straits around the world from where goods and services pass.
And the IMF, you may have heard in the lead-in, have come out and said that high energy prices should be passed on to customers and shouldn't be widely subsidized,
Exactly.
perhaps some targeted help for vulnerable people by certain governments. So what is the thinking behind that? Why are they warning countries not to do like a blanket subsidy on energy
Because
prices?
because if you want the IMF, let's start by saying this: the IMF is not a charity organization; it's a bank. The IMF, it's a bank. It's a bank, and its aim, it's in fact to guarantee the stability of the international financial system. Now, if countries start to subsidize the energy products or anything else, they will accumulate really big deficits in their budgets and national budgets. So that's why they are saying from now, do not do this because you will have a big problem later on. So that's why this warning is really it's the root of this warning comes from the fact that they want really countries to be able really to stabilize their uh, finance during this period. But I do believe that at the same time, and this is not said enough, but countries know that that the we have the World Bank who really, in fact, assign or allocate a certain amount ready to help countries that they are not able even to satisfy the needs of their population. And this is, in fact, could pass through credits from the or loans from the World Bank. But at this level, I do believe that we do not want to do the same mistake as what we did during the COVID pandemic. So that's why this warning, in fact, came out.
Well, Jassem, it's all misery, isn't it? There's not a lot of good news out there. If you could find any positive that you'd like to share, please do. But when it comes to the energy shock that countries are going to be facing around the world, how bad could that get? To go back to the negative, and also if the whole war was to end tomorrow, the ceasefire was made permanent, the Strait of Hormuz was opened, everyone went back to being best friends, and Iran and the United States made up. Would things go back to as they were before the war, and how quickly or how long would that take to get back to any normality?
No, 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 I don't think so. In fact, I will start with the last question. No, I don't think that even that if everything is okay, we stop the war completely, and we open in fact everything. You know, according to the IEA, we have more than 80 facility linked to the energy. They are in fact damaged So you need at least 1 year to 2 years as a period for the reparation, for the recovery of these, and to be back really to the capacity pre-war. So I think that things will be hard during at least 1 or 2 years to come back to the normal situation. If I take the case of the, let's say, now related to the food, let's say, first of all, the fertilizers, in fact, it's a huge problem. I don't know why there is, in fact, let's say a little bit negligence about what we can say about this product. Fertilizers, they are very important. In fact, the number of the population of the world is so huge that we are not able, in fact, to satisfy their needs just, in fact, by normal process. We need fertilizers, in fact, to reduce the period and to increase the quantity that we are producing. That's why really we do think that there is an underestimation of this problem. And I think that we will have during the next month an increase, a big increase in the prices of foods.
Okay.
Also
okay, I'm going to have to break in there. Sorry, I'm going to have to break in there, Jessam, unfortunately, because we're just out of time. But of course, and if Iran and the United States don't wake up and they go back to military action, it could end up with the Houthis getting involved, the Red Sea being affected, and the Suez Canal, and then all bets will be off, and we'll all have to move to the moon. Thank you very much for joining us from Beirut, Professor of International Economics at Lebanese University, Jessam Ashaka. An absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much indeed. Now, to Asia. Japan has announced a $10 billion framework to help Asian countries secure energy supplies and rising competition for oil due to the Middle East tensions. The support aimed at protecting Japan's supply chains will be channeled through state-backed institutions, including the Japan Bank for International Cooperation and Nippon Export and Investment Insurance. Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi said the package is equivalent to around 1.2 billion barrels of oil, roughly 1 year of ASEAN crude imports. The plan includes credit for alternative supplies such as U.S. crude, along with financing for businesses and governments in Japan's supply chain. It also supports energy diversification and expanded storage capacity. And now to our next economist from Hong Kong. We're now joined from Benny Kwok. Thank you very much for being here with us on Qnews. So 90% of Hormuz crude is heading to Asia. So how exactly does this $10 billion shield does $10 billion shield Japan's supply chains from a blockade or major disruption? Does it help?
I would think Japan is going to be active to help Southeast Asia because of two reasons. First, because both Japan and South Korea and the Southeast Asia are facing the shortage of oil because of the closure of the Hormuz, and Japan is now doing the oil diversification, and Japan would like to show the example of the Southeast Asia. That's the first. And the second thing, I would think that is Japan would like to take the lead to help Southeast Asia, because you are seeing that China is now stopped exporting the energy to other parts of the world because of the shortage as well, and Japan would like to balance the power in the region to compete with China as well, so that on one day, if there are any potential military conflicts in Taiwan, in the South China Sea, and Japan would have an active role, and so that to try to move the Southeast Asian countries not to stand on the side of China. So I would think it is for this action from Tokyo, it's not just helping the Southeast Asia to combat with the problems of the shortage of oil. and also it is a long-term plan for trying to getting more partners from Southeast Asia by just subsidizing the Southeast Asia within the economic difficulties.
And how's China feeling about all this then? Is Japan challenging China's energy influence in Southeast Asia by covering a year's ASEAN crude imports?
I would think, okay, all parts of Asia relies a lot on the Middle East energy. And of course, before this war, and China has a very huge economic influence in Southeast Asia. But now, because of the war, China have to look after its interests first. So that's why China has to stop exporting the energy products. And now, you see, the Southeast Asia is one of the vulnerable region that's suffering from the shortage of oil because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So that's why it gives the way for Japan to step in to help Southeast Asia. I would say it's trying to buy the confidence and buy some Southeast Asian allies, so that to help the United States and Taiwan for the preparation of the potential conflicts in the future. So I would think after this war, you're seeing more competitions between China and Japan in the arena of Southeast Asia, at least for the economic sphere.
Well, of course, Donald Trump has been making no secret of the fact that America has a lot of oil to sell, the biggest producer, of course, of oil in the world. And by this move by Japan to move to promoting U.S. crude, is this a deliberate strategy in Asia to try and get away from Middle East oil because of the problems like the Strait of Hormuz, when 90% of the oil is going in that direction?
Yes. And also remember, it should be a couple of weeks ago that Japan is investing the Alaska oil. You're seeing Japan has an agreement with the United States to invest in the Alaska oil. So that means Japan is helping the United States to diversify its buy as well. So you're seeing that many Asian countries recently buying a lot of the U.S. energies, and for this time, the Tokyo's action is to try to solidify and try to strengthen the U.S. The energy strength and advantage in Asia, so that on one hand, of course, the Asian economies is still buying the Middle East energies on one hand, but on the other hand, the Southeast Asia and other Asian economies could also buy the U.S. energies, maybe directly or maybe through Japan, and that would form a new I would say a new supply chain of the energy that would alleviate the shock from the Middle East and also strengthen the economic bloc that would help the Japan, United States, and even Southeast Asia to alleviate the potential of the economic shock for the coming potential conflicts in Southeast Asia and in South China Sea and also Taiwan.